If you want to follow along, I recommend this dbfiddle website. It's a free website and you don't even need to create an account. When you open the website, just click on SQL Server, that's the flavour of SQL that we're using for these videos, and make sure you choose AdventureWorks as the database. That will give you access to all of the same sample data that I'm using in these videos. Today we're going to be talking about date formatting in SQL. So we've already seen that dates are their own data type in SQL, but there are times that we want to format them in a particular way, either because we want to see those dates formatted in a specific way, or because we want to format them in a way that we can then aggregate them nicely later on, which we'll see in another video. Now, we've already also covered that the way that SQL does formatting isn't like Excel's formatting. What do I mean by that? Well, SQL doesn't have an equivalent of this number format option here. Remember, this one, it changes how the number looks on Excel, but it doesn't change the underlying value. SQL doesn't have this. What SQL has to do in order to format something, either a date or a number, it has to convert it into some text that looks like the format that we're after. So actually, the way that SQL does formatting is a lot closer to using the text function from Excel. It just calls it format in SQL, Microsoft SQL Server. Let's jump into this now. Just so that we've got several examples for us to use, rather than use our favorite department table, let's move over to the employee table today for these examples, just because we've got a birth date column with a nice wide variety of different dates. So how do we open the employee table in SQL? Well, remember, we always start with select and from. I've whacked in the star because I'm going to fill in the columns later on. The employee table is also in the human resources file, or the human resources folder, the human resources schema, however you want to think about it. But we need to put human resources first. And then it's the employee table. Now, I really only care about their unique ID, the business entity ID, and the birth date. They're the only two columns that we're really going to care about today. So I've updated my code. Let me run it. Here we go. And this, just for convenience, we'll just keep the top 5. We'll keep a sample of 5 of them. Let's just quickly remind ourselves how we can do some date formatting with the text function in Excel. So let's pop in an extra column. Okay, we'll do birth date formatted. So how can we use the text function? Well, let's write in text. We need to specify the value that we want to format. And then we need to specify the format that we want to use. So here's an example for formatting currency. For formatting dates, we use letters like Y to correspond to year, M to correspond to month, and D to correspond to date. So if we wanted to switch this format, it's currently in the universal format. Remember, I always recommend using the universal format when you're defining dates in SQL. But if we want to view some dates, well, I'm in the UK, so I might want to put day first, then month, and then let's go for a 2-digit year. Day, month, year. Here we go. So this is converted 1969 0129 to 29 0169. Zoom in a smidge so we can see that a bit better. And it's the same for the rest of them. If we wanted a 4-digit year, we'd just use 4Ys. And if you're in America, you probably want to do month first, then day, then year. We could do some more exciting things than this. If we specify more characters, we can get more words. So if we do, let's say 3 M's, then we'll do D, and then we'll do Y. we can get the short name for the month, then the day, then the year. If we do 4 M's, we can get the full name of the month, then the day, then the year. We can additionally do several letters for D. So let's do, let's swap this around. So this is one of the ones that I like to use. We've got the short name for the day of the week, then the day of the month, then the full name of the month, and then the year. If we do a 4th D, we can get the full name of the day of the week, then the day of the year, day of the month, then the month name, the full month name, and then the year. So Excel is already super flexible with how you can define date formats. And bear in mind, these are all aligned to the left of the cells. These are all text. So we've taken the date, which remember in Excel is a number. So we've taken that number and we've turned it into some text that looks like this. It's text that corresponds to the date, but we've just put it in a very specific format. Let's see how we can do exactly the same thing with SQL. Let's do the same thing with SQL. And just so that we can see exactly what we saw in Excel, I've just jotted down the formats that we just used in Excel so that we can see how we would apply the same ones in SQL. Bear in mind, this is specifically Microsoft SQL Server, the SQL flavor that we're using for these videos. If you're trying to do date formatting in any other SQL flavor, it's quite likely that there will be other implementations that you will need to learn specifically for those SQL flavors. So this is just for Microsoft SQL Server. So in Microsoft SQL Server, what function do we use? We don't use text, we instead use format. We're going to still pass in the birth date, and then we're going to pass in some format as well. And for consistency, let's also call this birth date formatted. So let's actually just try exactly the same as the first one that we did in Excel. Day, month, year. Is this going to work? Not quite. It's got the day part right, it's got the year part right, but it seems to have gotten the month wrong. And this is one bit that's extremely important to keep in mind. When it comes to SQL, these letters are case sensitive. In Excel, they're not. Excel understands what we want from the context, so it knows that the M's here are for month rather than for minute. Whereas SQL, we need to be a bit more specific. Well, SQL it's case sensitive. It distinguishes between them. So the lowercase m is minute, not month. To specify month in the format, we just need to use capital M's. So I've updated my code. Let me rerun it. Now this looks exactly like what we expect. So really, to do this first one, it's identical except with capital M's. What about the 4-digit year? We just add in more Y's. What about if you're in North America? Oops. You want to put the month first? Works exactly the same as the Excel version, just uppercase M's. What about the names for the months and then the days? Can we do those as well? Let's give it a go. So if I want the name of the month, the short name of the month, followed by the day of the month, followed by the full year, is this going to work? Absolutely. What about the full name of the month? Absolutely. And then what about one of my formats that I like to use? What about this one? So I'm just going to copy and paste. We'll change those lowercase m's to uppercase m's. So I'm expecting this to be the short name for the day. Is this going to work? Absolutely. And if we do a fourth one, is it going to give us the name of the day, the full name of the day of the week that is? Absolutely. So if you're familiar with doing the date formatting in Excel, doing the formatting in SQL is more or less identical. You don't use text, you use format. and you don't use lowercase m's, you do use uppercase m's, but everything is exactly the same. So transitioning from Excel to SQL for formatting dates, remember this is turning them into text that corresponds to that date. If you're already familiar with doing that in Excel, this transition is so super simple. Specifically for Microsoft SQL Server, that is. Remember, if you're using some other SQL flavor, you're going to need to learn what options that SQL flavor has for formatting dates. So far we've only formatted dates. It's also worth mentioning that we can format times. Now I'm not going to use an AdventureWorks example to format the time. I'm just going to show off something a little bit new, just to show how we can quickly format time. So for Excel, let's just use the now function for the moment. This gives us the current date and time. Is there an equivalent to now in SQL? There sure is, and in Microsoft SQL Server, it is get date. We'll run that just to prove that it is indeed the same thing. I will mention that other SQL flavors support other functions and other words. There is a much more common set of words that you'll see SQL flavors support that Microsoft SQL Server does not support. So this is just an FYI. If you're using something outside of Microsoft SQL Server, you can use current dates, current time, and current date time, or current time stamp, depending on the implementation. Now these are not available in SQL Server. These are just for other SQL flavors that do support them. So keep an eye out for these if you're using something that isn't SQL Server. Okay, so I've got the current date and time. How do I format? Let's just focus on the time part. How do I format the time part? Well, it's exactly the same. In Excel, we use the text function again. If we want to just format time, we use H for the hour, M for the minute, S for the second. So I could do something simple like yyyy-MM-dd. That gives me 8:32:56. Can we do something similar with the format function in SQL? We sure can. So if let's just write these on a new line. If we want to format time, we use exactly the same letters, H, M, and S, but just like with the date one, there is some case sensitivity going on. We do need to use the correct case for the letter. For hours, it's H, but capital H. For minutes, lowercase m. For seconds, lowercase s. Give that a rerun. Exactly the same thing. It's unlikely that you'll want to use any time formats outside of this one, which is why I'm not going to cover any other ones. But just note that just like text, format can also format times. While we're here, I'll mention that text can also format numbers into things like currency or whatever else. Format is exactly the same, but we're not going to be covering that in this video. Now that we know how to format dates and times, it's really up to you to then just use whichever format is appropriate for whatever you're working on at the time. But what I will do is I'll just mention some of my favorite formats, some of the ones that I use most commonly during my job whenever I'm using SQL. So these are my favorite ones. Let's see each of them in action. I'm just going to do it in SQL just for now because we've seen that it's almost identical to do it in Excel. So let me set up a format function with these formats. So we've already seen day and 1 year. Like I said, I'm in the UK, so this is one of my favorite formats to use. And sometimes, rather than using all numbers, I like to whack in a name in there, a name of the month. We've seen that if we just want to format the time part, we just use H, M, and S, but capital H and lowercase m and lowercase s to format those parts. And if you don't care about the seconds, you can always just lop them off. Since I work with a lot of data that's both date and time, one of my favorites is this one. It has both the date and the time in them. It's got the right precision that I need when I'm working with dates and times for the most part. But if I want a more human readable date time, this is the one that I like to use, because it says the name of the month, followed by the day and the year, then the time, but with also whether it's AM or PM. If we drop the F part, we can just stick to the T part on the end. If you don't particularly care about those microseconds, again, totally up to you. You can construct this however you want. Now, whenever I'm doing aggregations, if I'm rolling up numbers to a monthly level, I like to use this one. Just the year and the month part. This is a great one, and we'll see it used in a later video. This is a great one for getting data just for that particular month in the year. And another favorite that I see people like to use is the name of the month followed by the year, the 2-digit year. Again, if we're looking at just month and year, this is another good example. A full name for the month, a full name for the year. And then finally, this is one of the ones that I showed off earlier as well. This is probably my favorite one when I need to format a particular date for humans to read, because it's the day of the week and then the full date. I'll drop all of these examples in the description below so that you can copy and paste them if you like. But that covers everything for date formatting. And there's no need to wrap up, because the wrap up is just use the format function and you use more or less exactly the same format text that you would use in Excel, but just remember to get the cases correct. Format can also format numbers, just like text can, but we're not going to be covering that in this video. I hope you found this useful, and we'll catch you in the next one.